In the book of Revelation, we learn about the whore of Babylon. And no, I don't mean like the musical or anything like that. Now it says she's a literal whore, but she's also said to be a city. So what exactly does this passage actually mean? Well, let's dive into the text. But before we do, well, come on in. Come on in. Join us for our daily readings from the Bible and other stuff too. We just finished reading through the whole book of Revelation. It took us a year because we read the Bible cover to cover every day. Sometimes we do special videos where we just kind of break down what we learned and answer some questions. So the passage is in Revelation chapter 17 verses 1 through 6, and let's go ahead and get right into it. The passage reads, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, 'Come here. I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters.' And the angel took me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." Let's pause there for a second and break this down a little bit. First of all, the term whore was used back in the time of Christ and was known by Jewish people as one who prostituted themselves in pagan temples. That was their primary form of worship. Also, scholars have pointed out that there's a lot of parallels between this passage and the story of the seduction of Israel in the Old Testament. You can look at passages like Isaiah 23, for example, or Ezekiel 16, where a woman is representative of the nation. She has been unfaithful to Yahweh, prostituting herself with other gods. That's a lot of the background for why this passage is the way that it is. Let's keep going. The judgments against Babylon, therefore, are judgments against those who follow false religion and reject God. Notice that it says, "I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast." So we have a woman, and then we have this beast. This beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. And it's interesting because we know that the number 7 in the Bible represents completeness. 7 churches, 7 lamps, 7 spirits of God, etc. And then 10 is oftentimes used to represent nations or governments, depending on the context. And so it seems like we have this woman, this religious figure, that is somehow connected to political powers, world powers. She's sitting on them, riding them, directing them, if you will. She's got this golden cup in her hand. And she's also adorned in purple and scarlet and gold and precious stones. Basically, everything is pointing to luxury, wealth, power, things like that. And then on her forehead it says her name is written in a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Now, commentators, they struggle with this one. Is this a real place? Is this a figurative thing? What exactly is this? Well, the word Babylon comes from the Hebrew word Babel, which means to confuse or to babble. And remember the story of the Tower of Babel, where men tried to build a tower to reach heaven, and God confused their languages and they couldn't communicate with one another. So they were scattered around the earth. So Babylon's going to represent confusion. So that's part of what she is. Then it says, she's the mother of abominations. And the word abomination means something that is detestable or disgusting. And so she is the mother of these things, if you will. And then it says that she is the abomination of the earth. And so whatever it is, Babylon, it's representative of all this confusion and abominations, these things that are disgusting to God. It says that she's drunk with the blood of the saints. And commentators say that the blood represents here suffering, and so she's drunk with their suffering, she's drunk with their pain, she's drunk with their persecution. And then it says that she's drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And so it's like, whoever this woman is, she delights in the suffering of the saints, she delights in the persecution of Christians. And so, in the early church, especially during the time of Augustine, Babylon was interpreted to be Rome. And so Rome was this persecuting city. Rome was this confusing city. There was much, much more to it than that. But that's just generally how they interpreted it. But notice how the book says, I saw a woman. So again, there's a lot of different ways to interpret this. One of them is that it's simply a woman. Another way of interpreting this is that the woman is a symbol of religious figures, religious systems, religious kingdoms, if you will. A third way to interpret it is that it's a symbol of the entire system, political, religious, social, cultural, whatever you want to call it. Again, there's multiple ways to interpret this, and you can interpret it in various ways without compromising your theology. Now, we know that Jesus spoke about Babylon in Matthew 1, verse 16, where he says, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." And he compared them to the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And then he basically says, beware of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. He didn't just say beware of their teaching. He compared it to the leaven. And leaven is something that is hidden in dough. And then it causes the whole dough to rise. And so it's like you can't see it, but it's working from the inside out, causing the whole thing to eventually be corrupted. And so it seems like Jesus is saying the Pharisees and Sadducees are like this leaven. They are hidden, but they are corrupting everything. Also, Daniel spoke about this type of thing when he spoke about the image that was set up and that was struck by an enormous stone in chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 2, there's this dream that Nebuchadnezzar has, and it's a dream about this huge statue. It's made out of various metals, gold, silver, brass, iron, clay, and then it's struck by this stone, and eventually the whole statue falls, and it's cracked and is utterly destroyed. And that stone became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. And so this is probably also representative of some sort of kingdom, political system, cultural system that is eventually going to be replaced by the kingdom of God. When we think about Babylon, we're thinking about a place of power, a place of oppression, a place of persecution, a place of idolatry. And so it's interesting because we can connect that with the story of Daniel in the lion's den, because he wouldn't bow to the image that was set up. He wouldn't bow to Bel, to Merodach, and he was thrown in the lion's den. We can connect that with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were thrown into the fiery furnace because they refused to bow to the image of Nebuchadnezzar. We can connect that with Daniel in the lion's den. And so Babylon is basically a place of persecution, but also a place of idolatry. And so when we think about the worship of Nimrod, we think about the worship of Tammuz. We think about all of these various pagan deities that were being worshipped back in the time of the Bible. And it seems like this was something that was very prevalent in Babylon. And then, of course, we think about the book of Esther because Ahasuerus is believed to be Artaxerxes Longimanus, and he's the king of the Persians, but he rules over Babylon. And so you have Haman, who's the wicked villain in that book, who's trying to annihilate the Jews. And then you have Esther, who's a Jewess, and Mordecai, who's her cousin. And they're trying to save the Jewish people. And it seems like the place of Babylon is definitely a place of persecution for the Jews. And so while the word Babylon doesn't appear in the New Testament, the idea of Babylon does appear in the New Testament. And we see that in Revelation 14:8, where it talks about the kings of the East following the beast. And it calls them kings of the East coming out of the smoke of the burning of Babylon. And so there's a definite connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament in regards to Babylon. And so when John uses this imagery, his audience would immediately understand that this is a place of persecution, a place of confusion, a place of idolatry. And so in Revelation, John identifies Babylon as a city. He calls it the Great City, and then he calls it Mystery, Babylon the Great. And so whatever this is, this city, it's like the epitome of all of this, if you will. This is like the worst-case scenario. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down below. I'd love to hear from you and maybe answer some of your questions. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.